All right. Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to Sacred Axis, a space for the whimsically divine. I'm Chesten.
And I'm Christina.
All right. And today, another light topic, as I like to do. So today, I wanted to piggyback off of the intuition versus instinct versus spiritual psychosis episode, because in that episode, we were talking a lot about or bringing up self-trust being an important part of it. And so for today's episode, I wanted to talk about having a sense of self as well as having self-trust. So what those mean, ways to develop it. And then I have 5 questions that I got off of a website called Newport Institute about gauging like self-worth. So, again, another very light topic, as I like to do.
Light subjects.
Exactly. I like to keep it light, right?
Yep.
So, what does sense of self mean? So, a sense of self is your perception of the characteristics that define you, your talents, your strengths, your weaknesses, your beliefs, your values, your likes, your dislikes, and your core personality traits. With a sense of self, you know who you are and what you stand for. And a sense of self is your unique identity as a human being. And why do we care? Like, why is it important to have a sense of self? So, lack of sense of self causes feelings of uncertainty or indecisiveness when making important choices. It can also lead to difficulty setting boundaries. Then people with a lack of sense of self, they're more likely to be coerced or manipulated or pushed into supporting things that, or going along with things that can be detrimental to their well-being or the well-being of others. Obviously, if they do that, it does not take away of their self-accountability. I just bring that up to show how important having a sense of self so that we as people make good, moral, ethical decisions that support ourselves and others, that having a sense of self can help with that. And if nothing else, having a strong sense of self, I think it makes it easier to spot the bullshitters or spot the con men or spot the like cult leader types. It doesn't mean that we can't sometimes fall into those traps. And it doesn't mean that having a sense of self means that we're always going to be perfect in our decisions. But I think having that strong sense of self when things start to not feel right, instead of trying to convince ourselves that we're wrong, maybe we'll revisit and be like, okay, does this person actually display the attributes that I believe? Or does this group of people that I'm a part of, are they actually kind, considerate people that I thought that they were? Or is it that I was wrong and that's okay? And let me back away and get out of here. Does that make sense?
It does. And when you were saying about like a sense of self-worth,
Mhm.
2 things came to mind. Is we fall from me just thinking if we don't have that sense of self-worth, have a potential to fall into codependency and also fall into being in a space maybe of narcissism. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think
those
that's fair to say.
Yeah. So I think if we have that self-worth, we can see, we have a clear picture of what's surrounding us.
And I think that's a good point to bring up the self-worth, because you can have a sense of self and poor self-worth depending on your attributes, whether you view them as good or bad. So what I mean by that is like a sense of self that includes both likes and dislikes. And so, um, let's say you like a book and that you're the only person in your group that likes that book and everybody else harps on it that it's terrible or whatever have you, depending, that could possibly make a low sense of self-worth instead of looking at it as, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of problematic books out there. I'm not talking about that type. It's like, say you like Pride and Prejudice, right? And they're like, oh, that's so stupid. Who cares about Mr. Darcy or whatever? Instead of viewing it as, oh, because I like this thing and the group of people I'm around don't, maybe I'm wrong with it, having self-worth would look at them and be like, there's nothing wrong with having something I like. So I don't want to hang around y'all anymore. Get some taste.
Yeah.
Like, gets, or it's like the pumpkin spice stuff, right? How many times would we see in the fall people poking fun at people who likes pumpkin spice lattes or whatever? And they're like, oh, that's so basic or whatever crap, just poo pooing on it. Who cares if it brings someone joy? So a person with good self-worth, so their sense of self was they know that they like their pumpkin spice latte, but if they don't have good self-worth, then people like, picking on them about it or being like, you're so like, being told that they're dumb for liking it or basic. A person with low self-worth may view that as this is evidence that I am not as great or that I am in an inferior position. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Mhm. Yeah, it does. It makes me think of, is that a perceived threat in a sense? Not a perceived
Well,
threat, but a
well,
perceived. So now we have to we're reframing our own worth.
and I think it's fair to say a perceived threat in the sense of ostracization. Like if the person is worried, oh, this person isn't going to be my friend anymore. Or, if they think that, then everybody else must think that in the world, so that sort of stuff. So I think it's fair that it can be viewed as a perceived threat because all of us, like humans, we're social creatures. We're built to like connect with each other and be connected in our communities. And so, I mean, it makes sense to me that, that could be perceived as a threat. And so, like, again, that sense of self, having your likes, it's not just having those likes, but the worth being like that it's okay to have those enjoyments and not viewing ourselves as bad or less than for having the likes that we have. Right. Pretty much my rule of thumb with things that a person likes, as long as it's not threatening anybody's well-being, that it's not hurting people or intentionally causing pain or even unintentionally, because if a person likes throwing rocks, but they're not paying attention to where they're throwing it at and it hits someone in the head, that's still like, hey, we got to be more mindful of this. But with likes, it's one of those, if it's not hurting anybody or causing pain, then like what you like,
Mhm.
you know?
Because my thought process is everybody's different. Everybody's gonna like what they like. Everybody's gonna not like what they don't like. And I'm 100% fine with all of that as long as it's not hurting or harming anything or anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I don't see it as, I think I have, for me, we can talk about it later, but I feel like I have pretty good self worth. But that's, we're born that way. Sometimes I think through our life, those things kind of come in and maybe rearrange. So I think like with me, I worked on bringing all that back.
I wonder if it would be interesting and there may already be a religious study type of thing. I didn't even look it up. But I wonder if there's a difference with self-worth for people who didn't grow up in religious settings that focused on people being bad,
You
like
know,
inherently bad. I
think
think that makes a difference
I think it
personally.
does because I think I wasn't raised with you have to have this religion and this is I was given, which I'm blessed, grateful for the opportunity to evolve on my own, be able to go what routes I wanted to go. So I went different spiritual paths. I looked into so many and none of them had anything to do with anything bad.
Yeah, and I think that religion can be helpful for people. The style of religion that I'm talking about is that the fear-based. Like humans are terrible and are punished for being terrible and for existing. And a lot of the times the things that they talk about being punished for aren't like they don't seem that big, or at least the way that we treat it now. Like, who cares who people love? As
Yeah.
long as they're consenting adults, who cares? It's none of our business. So it's like, it's interesting that, I've known people who they had tattoos and they were told they were going to hell.
Yeah. And
It's a tattoo.
I don't know.
I've had people told that because they dyed their hair black, they were going to hell.
Yeah, I think
So,
it's fear-based.
yeah.
It's like fear-based, and usually fear-based is there to have a form of control. And that's just from my
Yeah.
perception of things. So I'm like, same as you, we are all here to love who we love no matter who it is. There's
Consenting
nothing.
adults.
Yeah,
Cons
100%.
adults. Gotta
Yeah,
say that. But yeah,
yeah.
agreed. Well, and also, I mean, I've heard that about piercings, like, "Oh, this person has too many piercings." What does that even mean? Like, if, it's not that bodily autonomy,
I think,
right?
is it because that's different than
Right.
whoever's saying that?
And that can absolutely be a thing. So my point with that, the reason that I'm bringing all that stuff up is a person's sense of self. It's not just that you ought to ask yourself, what are your talents? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your beliefs? What are your values? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What are your core personality traits? It's not just asking that, but how do you feel about each thing? So say you really like tattoos and getting tattoos, do you feel good about that? And if you don't, why? Because it's awesome. You do you. So because that goes into self-worth. So I'll go ahead and do the questions listed for self-worth, if that's okay. Because I
Absolutely.
think they blend well with sense of self, like we're talking about. And again, so the self-worth questions, it's 5 of them. I got this off of Newport Institute. I'll have it in the links. I'll link it in the show notes. So question number 1, do you like, value, and respect yourself? Question number 2, do you feel worthy of being treated with respect and kindness? Question 3, do you feel worthy of love? Question 4, when you think about yourself, are your thoughts generally positive? Question 5, if you were describing yourself to a stranger, would you choose mostly positive words? Right.
Yeah.
So I think going through those questions and answering them honestly can help give clarity, and then bringing in that sense of self. Because do we have poor self worth because we've convinced ourselves that our unique identity is somehow bad or inappropriate, or maybe we don't have one at all, you know, or maybe we don't like to acknowledge even our dislikes. There are people who are like, I like everything. No, you don't. No one likes everything. It's okay to dislike things. That doesn't mean that we're like condemning it necessarily. It's just like, I don't like that flavor. I don't like that beverage. I don't like that food. I don't like that artist.
Yeah. 'Cause
Of
we're
course,
we're choosing that for ourselves.
yeah, it just doesn't, yeah. And I will say, like, because I have friends who are into certain artists, and I'll listen to it, and then I'll say to them, "Look, I think it was with you too that you played some stuff for me." And I was like, "I respect how talented they are as an artist. I can hear it. Like, I can hear in how they're playing it. I can hear it with their voice. Like, I get that, and I get that they are very talented. It's not my cup of tea, but I think they're fantastic."
Mhm.
I mean, so that would be considered a dislike for me. So you can still dislike something and still have like reverence for it or respect for
Have
it
value
or
for it.
whatever. Have
Like, you
value
still
for it. Yeah.
value it, but, yeah,
Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
I'm gonna change the radio station. It's okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
It's like, tell me more about how they influence you and tell me more about how much you love them. I want to hear about your passions. I'm not going to listen to them when I go home.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So like that it's okay to have both likes and dislikes, and it's okay to have things that you and your friends may not share all the same likes and dislikes, and that's okay too. Again, that mutual respect.
And that brings in our individuality.
Yes.
It's going back to that. This is what molded me. That's what's molded you. Those are the things you like. These are things I like. And that's okay
Yeah.
because we're all different.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things too is that I wonder how much people focus on having, of course it's nice to have similar interests because then you can bond over that, but like I think the times where we have to really consider like our group is when it comes to like morals and values and ethics. So like a sense of self is, and not just that, like our sense of self, are we actually embodying it and are we bringing that into the world? And I wonder if, when it comes to self trust, if one of the ways that we may not have, one of the reasons some people may not trust themselves is if they are not congruent with their stuff. Like they're not congruent with their sense of self and how they practice it in the world. And what I mean by that is, a big topic or a a heavy one is for values like, I believe everybody should be treated with basic human decency and everybody should be treated equally and things like that. Am I practicing it in my everyday life? Am I treating everybody with basic human decency, with courtesy, with all that sort of stuff, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their backgrounds? Am I treating them as a human being? And then do I support policies and do I support people like leaders in the community who also support treating everybody with basic human decency and with respect? Because if I say, yeah, I like everybody, and of course I believe everybody's wonderful, but if I'm not doing that, then that shows that it's not congruent, right?
Yeah.
Or the reverse, you'll have people who their sense of self is they don't believe everybody's equal. But to your face, they'll say, oh, yeah, I believe everybody's equal, but they really don't.
Mhm.
And there's that incongruency, that sense of self. What do you believe? What do you believe about how human beings should be treated? How do you believe kids should be treated? And the people in your life, are they also showing that same belief, And what are
Mhm.
you doing about it? If they turn out to be, bigot, then what are you doing about it? Are you still keeping them around? Are you showing distance? Are you trying to have conversations? Like, hey, have you ever thought of it this way? How is that? What's going on there with it? Because
Yeah.
I do from what like my limited experience with life, my limited experience with interacting with people, I really feel like a sense of self and self-worth hugely influence self-trust, which in turn hugely influences intuition and instinct and all that sort of stuff. It's like a
Yeah.
circle.
It is. It is. It completes it.
Mhm.
You know, say you might not have that trust, but just continue to work on it to complete that circle. Find those areas where you feel that you can gain your trust back and where it
Yeah.
was lost. Those are those
Yeah.
things of reconnecting to complete that circle.
Agreed. But because, one of the reasons I'm talking about it, because right now there's a lot of stuff happening. I mean, we're recording this in early February, but a lot of terrible things have been happening in this country. Terrible violence against citizens, which to be honestly, it's been happening before this. I mean, we saw videos with George Floyd. This is not new. And there have been multiple people in between. Even before that, imagine it's one of the hard realities, but one of the realities I know that for me of having to accept was, because I used to do the whole, oh, these people are acting like Nazis and the people who are being bigots, who are being racist, all that sort of stuff. And it's true, but at the same time, I didn't recognize and acknowledge that Nazism, it came from studying how the United States treated Black people. So really, it's that a lot of stuff hasn't changed. And I know that for me acknowledging that and just, it's important. And then it's like, okay, let me look at that sense of self. How, where am I going to go with this? So, what organizations am I going to continue to support? And I've shared it with people in my community when they're like, oh, it's like Germany. I'm like, no, it's like the United States. Like, a lot of this treatment isn't new. It's now shifting over to white people as well, but it's not new.
One thing that I just want to add in because it just popped in my head is we have to go back and remember how the United States was founded. How
True.
did we acquire this? Nothing
Oh, yeah.
has changed. And I
No.
think, like with me, I just want to, just a little punch in is we have evolved in a human species in some forms, and there's some forms we haven't evolved. And sometimes we start evolving, but then we take 3 steps back, move one up, 3 steps back. So for me, it's a little disheartening just to see the state of not even the United States, but of the world that we're in. But just to acknowledge in the United States to always remember how we acquired this land.
True. Well, yeah, when I learned about the real history with how we acquired it and what happened to native indigenous cultures, it was horrifying. It was horrific.
Yeah, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. And even for slavery, or when I first found out about George Washington and what his teeth, his dentures were really made of, like that they were made from slave teeth, it was horrifying. Or it's like, we're finding out about cannibalism, currently we're finding that out, but there was cannibalism then too. Like that, like you said, there are a lot of ways that things haven't changed. They were just hidden. And now people feel comfortable enough to be more out in the open with their bigotry.
One thing just popped in my head, I just want to chime in, is some things have changed, some things haven't. And the things that haven't are just dressed differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're just wearing a
Yeah.
different, whatever that is just
Yeah.
dressed a little bit differently, but it still
Right.
falls in the same realm.
Yeah. 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 Cause, or they'll shift policies in order to still keep the thing. Like with capitalism, I've heard people compare it at this point to in more of an indentured servitude type of situation because of just how little workers are making compared to me, honestly. So my thing with capitalism at right now, currently, I view it as multi-level marketing, honestly. 'Cause you can't tell me it's different in the sense that the CEO and the people at the top make an extravagant amount and, the middle tier don't make as much as the top tier, but a little bit more. And then, of course, the workers are all screwed.
Yeah.
Like, the first time I said that to someone who studies economy, they kinda looked at me at first. They were like, and I'm like, "Right now." But, and not to get distracted by all of that stuff, but or not to get to veer off with it, but all these things are super duper important. They're part of our history, and by having a sense of self and having that sense of self, we're more likely to have self trust. So when we hear about this stuff, when we hear about the terrible aspects of history and also the terrible things that are happening presently, where there's video evidence, there's all sorts of evidence happening before our eyes, by us having a good sense of self and trusting ourselves, trusting what we are seeing, trusting what we are hearing, we're more likely to believe the things that are happening. And by acknowledging the devastation of it, acknowledging how terrible things are, we're more inclined to take action to do something about it,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. And for every person, it's going to be different how they contribute. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this stuff, is because I realized when you had brought up your experience, Christina, when we were talking about the instinct versus intuition and having that self trust, I'm like, oh crap, self trust is important. Like, how can a person, how do we encourage people to trust themselves, trust again what they're seeing, what they're hearing, being able to have that epiphany of, you know what, this group that I'm part of, they're actually not the best. They actually don't support everybody. They're actually really harmful, or they support others being harmed. Trusting ourselves when something doesn't feel right. I know that for me, I had a conversation one time with a person that they read a bunch of religious books and believe a bunch of, everybody's divine and all that stuff. But hearing them actually talk about people, and they definitely had stereotypes and prejudices about people of certain races, people of certain genders. And I looked at them and I'm like, you're not practicing what you believe. And they looked at me and they were like, what's the big deal about that? And it was so uncomfortable.
Did your jaw drop? You're like,
My jaw dropped and I was stunned, and they were so convinced that I knew I wasn't going to change their mind. And I had to acknowledge that and take a step back. It was one of those, that conversation sucked, but it really taught me a lot about people who, going back to that, a person may even have a false sense of self. Like, yes, I believe these things, but when it comes into actual practice, they may not, or
they
their
missed the mark.
instincts. Yeah. Or their prejudices, their whatever may get in the way of them expressing that belief that they have.
So I just want to say, like, I felt from that conversation, like with you having that conversation with that person, that you 100% had trust within yourself because you walked away.
Yeah. In that sense, there are ways, there are aspects of self-trust that I totally have struggled with. I was really lucky to have been raised in a family that believed and practiced that everybody is equal and you treat everybody as equal.
Yeah.
And
Same here.
so, yeah. Now, granted, there are times where I had to look at myself and be like, am I really following through with that? And I've really had to like learn and read books about making sure to like acknowledge any prejudices I may have had under the surface that I wasn't even aware of. I hate it. But like when I was in my teens, I was totally a person who would do the what was she wearing?
Hmm.
I am not proud of that.
Yeah.
Right. But I have to acknowledge that that was a thing. I did say that. And
But you
so I,
acknowledge that now,
uh,
and
yeah,
you're like, "Whoa," reeling that back, like, "What was that?
yeah.
Where is that?" No.
Well, and so using that as an example of for the sense of self, like I believe that everybody should be treated equally. I believe people should be safe. And so doing the what was she wearing, that's not me supporting that everybody should be safe without having to make that effort, right? And so that's not congruent with my actual core beliefs that I want everybody to feel safe and loved and things like that. Okay, well, where did that come from? And like, oh, it was me taking the side of the abuser or the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And I had to acknowledge that. And so, because I don't want to make it sound like, oh, I've always known this stuff. No, I've had plenty of like smacks in the face of myself, like being like, oh, I said that. That was not nice. Or I, that does not support what I actually believe. Why would I even say that? Or why would I even believe that when that's not congruent with what I believe as a whole? So I think that's the other good part about getting a sense of self and asking your sense of self is because by being very firm about those things, then when those sound bites pop up that you may say or you may think, it's like, oh, that did not feel right.
Yeah.
Like that's not congruent with anything else that I believe. And that's actually very harmful and problematic. So
But I just
that's
wanna
been my
say,
experience with it.
like, that's our human side, but I
Uh-huh.
love the fact that you acknowledge it, check in,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
that's where our growth is. That's where we continue like, "Uh-huh, gotcha, gotcha."
Well, and I think that having self-worth, going back to that, when we build that sense of self-worth, then we're not expecting ourselves to be perfect.
Mhm,
And so it's easier. I've noticed that the more of self-worth that I have built, the easier it is to admit my mistakes and my faults and my flaws. And if someone points out, "Hey, what you said, that wasn't nice or that wasn't polite," I'm less inclined to get defensive. I'll be like, "Oh,
yeah, you're
oh,
like, then you can
yeah,
put
no,
yourself like, "Ooh, where did that come
yeah."
from?"
Right? Oh,
Yeah,
that wasn't fair, or that's not actually yeah. And so I I feel like that's another good reason to have that sense of self-worth as well as a sense of self, and that we can change and we can evolve for the better. I like
mhm,
the saying that like in life you can get better, worse, or crystallize.
yep, I
So,
like that.
yeah. But yeah, so sense of self, figure out who you are, what self-worth. Oh, and the way to help build self-worth is self-compassion.
Mhm,
So, of course, it's important to again, like I said the thing and I'm like that was not great about myself. And at the same time, that doesn't mean lambasting myself for the rest of my life over it. Or you can view it as I'd rather focus on doing better,
mhm,
being better about it, and supporting organizations and supporting people that support women, or support people who have been victimized. Let me rephrase it like that and making sure that it goes across different planes, not just the what was she wearing
mhm,
aspect, right? So, that's how I do it. And again, still have compassion for myself of, yeah, that that wasn't the best, but let me grow and change and focus on being a better person. And of course, making amends with whoever I need to make amends with, apologizing and being accountable in whatever ways that I need to apologize and be accountable.
mhm, yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. That is, and that's that compassion for ourselves, and we're acknowledging that, so instantaneously. We're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." That right there just sparked that change in us for just to grow and evolve.
And I've noticed that, yeah, I've noticed that it gets easier to do that stuff. Sleep.
It does. I wanna add it does get easier with that growth and acknowledging those things. Like, even
Mm,
for me, like, if I'm like, I have to put myself in check on something, I'm like, "Where did that come from?" That stemmed from something. That could have been being r how what was raised, societal, whatever it is. It evolved from something. It wasn't just
yep.
popped here. It evolved from
Yeah.
something. And once you
That is
find that root, you're like, "Oh, okay. Let me work on that." There's areas that we can work on.
well, and I will say too, so what I'll end up doing when I'm talking to others about it or talking to others and say they make a statement about like that, I would be like, no, it wasn't their fault. It was the
Mhm.
other person's fault. They didn't do anything wrong. And it's really interesting that, and it, of course, and I'm not saying, oh, this person is so stupid. How could you say that? I just am like, hey, like that it sounds like, why aren't we blaming the perpetrator instead? And it's really interesting that they take a moment and they're like, I think sometimes we get caught in sound bites. That's what I call it, is like sound bites where we'll say the phrase because we've heard it so much somewhere, whether it was like you were talking about, like ancestral, like our um, immediate environment, like family, whatever, or it could be social stuff. Like it could be on TV. It could be in some type of media. Of course, now there's social media too. It could be in newspapers. It could be when I look back on how cruel grown ass people were to underage pop stars when I was growing up
Mhm.
and how cruel the media was calling all these pop stars fat and whatever, just try and that they tried to make fat sound terrible.
Mhm.
For one, they tried to make it sound like being fat was the worst thing on the face of the planet, which is freaking ridiculous. Like there was like when I look back on the way adults were treating teenagers and kids, it's abhorrent. And I'm like, no wonder. Like I did not like did not I really struggled with my body growing up. I'm like, no freaking wonder. Cause I was hearing that stuff and seeing that stuff and seeing the magazines and all it was such crap. And so but because I didn't have that self-worth, and to me, self-worth had become unfortunately, one of my beliefs had been that you had to look a certain way to be treated a certain way. It does not matter how we look. It doesn't matter if we're pretty. It doesn't matter if we're beautiful. It doesn't matter if we're handsome. It doesn't matter if we're cute. It doesn't matter if we're grotesque. It doesn't matter if we're ugly. It does not matter our visual appeal. Everybody should still be treated with basic human decency.
Yep.
But that
Yeah.
was a value that I didn't realize that I had incorporated into my sense of self.
It's like, I wanna say, like, those are valued perceptions. Like, all those perceptions, that was now looked at as, if you think of it, a perception is just someone's point of view.
Yeah, it
It's
was
how they're
just an
viewing
opinion.
that. So
Yeah.
now we're like, "Oh, we're gonna listen to this person because they say they were a beautiful pop star."
Uh,
But that's just a perception, their perception, media's perception. Yeah. It's like, that trust is knowing how to listen to our own voice instead of someone else's. Yeah.
and to take that, so obvious, like, because my experiences, I can talk about being overweight versus being thin. I can talk about my experiences as a woman. I have my bracket. So how I feel in these things, am I applying that compassion and that this is some crap and, I should be treated well? Am I applying it to other categories and to other groups of people? Because there are people who they know they're supposed to be treated well, but they're not applying it to other demographics. And again, is that then being acting in integrity? But yeah, so, sense of self, having that sense of self and having self-worth with your fancy talents, your strengths, your weaknesses, your beliefs, your values, your likes, your dislikes, and your core personality traits. All right. And so bringing that into which we've already honestly talked about it, but why not still bring it up with self trust? So, with self trust, it's not about being perfect or right. It's believing you'll do your best to make decisions and operate within your set of values and morals. Self trust is being open and curious and being okay with compassionately questioning and possibly challenging your ideals with the knowledge that it's done for your and humanity's best interests. So, that's how I define self trust.
Yeah, that probably kind of just puts it all bundles it all up. Yeah.
Yeah, so because I think the thing is with self-trust that I think it's one of those, like, and I have to check myself with it about being right, and it's just I like this I've learned to say instead, like, so embracing the curiousness of things, I'll phrase it now as like, "Oh, that's really interesting," or, "I'm interested to see how this plays out," or, "I'm interested to see da 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 da." So it's bringing that curiosity into it instead of me putting I'm trying not to put more of a filter onto something than needs to be,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Mhm. Sometimes we don't know. We don't kind of like I brought up, and I think in one of the other past episodes, we don't know. We may not know that boundary of how much trust we do have within ourselves until we are in that space to really feel it. Like for me, when I was on a yoga wall with bands, like with these bands, I had to trust my own self, my own body, that I wouldn't fall. Right there, that was such a pivotal moment of my realization of like, "Oh, I didn't have that trust within myself in my physical body. What else don't I have trust?" So that right there, that is that triggering point of like, "Oh, well, let's see. Let's work on this. What is this? Where did this come from? What are the things am I not trusting myself in with me being here on this planet right now?"
That's a really good point because, like, you can have self-trust in one category and not in other categories or the nuances about it. Because definitely something that with self-trust, because, judgment gets a bad rep, like being judgmental, having judgments. So that's something probably honest, if I'm honest with myself, one of my core personality traits is judging things. Like, and it's not always black and white, like good and bad or something, but judgments like, I want to be around this person. I don't want to be around this person. This person feels off to me. This person I feel comfortable with. Cause I would just have these feelings about people. And I have been wrong about people too, right? That I've had an initial impression and I was very wrong about that first impression due to my biases, due to my history, due to whatever I heard growing up. So I'm not perfect at it. And there are plenty of times that I'll get it wrong, but that is one of my traits is that I'm gonna judge situations and I'm gonna judge people. And especially I'm gonna judge people about who they defend, what people are saying right now regarding like just everything that's going on right now. What people are saying with the Epstein files and that coming out. Are they defending? Are they trying to deny it? And yeah, I'm going to have a judgment about that person. And I'm not going to want to be around them personally, and I think that having that self-trust that there's a time and a place to have that, to look at someone and be like, I can't be around you, or these morals, these are your morals. You're showing me who you are. Okay. Like, and I think having that, seeing things for what they are, and not trying to put a spin. I think that's the other part too for me is that I always thought that everybody is inherently good and that everybody inherently wants the world to be a better place. And regardless of why it happens, there are people who don't want the world to be a better place. So, not talking about whatever their trauma, whatever that does right now, that does not matter for this conversation. But there are people who do not want the world to be a better place. And there are people who make money and get put in positions of power by having the world be in a bad place. They want fear. They want people to fight against each other. They want people to dislike each other because they gain more money and power and position. And that there are people who are predators and they're very happy with it and very content with it. And I know that for me, that has been a very hard thing to acknowledge because it feels so against like what I feel like the world should be, but that's just what it is. And I have to trust that. Like that, okay, because I realized how much I would suppress that part of me that just acknowledges things for what they are. Well, this person did a terrible thing. Well, this person is a predator. Oh, this person is an abuser. Oh, this person is a murderer. Like, just this is what they are. They may be other aspects, but this is a really big thing that they are too. And they did do this thing. And it doesn't matter what their backstory is, they did this. And just trusting that for me, I didn't realize how much I struggled with that until I started naming it of, oh, this person is a racist. Like, oh, this person is a bigot. Oh, this person is a sexist. Like, that was really hard because it was people that I didn't want to do that. Like, but by having that sense of like my morals, my values, my ethics, what does racism look like to me? What does sexism look like to me? What does homophobia look like to me? I had to acknowledge those things. And if that person is checking those boxes, they're checking those boxes. And I've got to trust what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what they are showing me, what they are showing others, what they're bragging about. Sucks, but you got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think going back to that trust, just seeing with our own eyes and
Yeah.
just trusting what we actually see, no matter where we are. When we walk all day in our life, we just trust what we see for what it is. We trusting it. And I just want to touch a little bit on we had the word judgment, and sometimes it's not even judgment may be viewed certain ways and or have a different definition. But I think sometimes when we just see things for what they are, that's what they are. It's not a judgment. We're just seeing what they are for what they are. We're seeing the true color of whatever this is or whatever that is. It's not a judgment. We're just seeing what that true
Well,
color is. And we don't want to be around those energies. And that's not a
yeah.
judgment.
No, I
I'm
totally do the
trusting
judgment
myself.
too.
I'm trusting myself. I'm like, no, I'm fine. And I don't have to have an excuse of like, say, I don't want to go here because of a person. I'm like, no, I don't feel like going because I don't like the energies that are going to be
Yeah.
there. And that's not judgmental. That's just me like, I'm
Well,
good
on
right
my
here.
side, there also is judgment because I'm like, yeah, that person should be in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that person, yeah, they should be tried. They should be in jail.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I do.
Gotcha.
But I get what you're saying too. It's true, like, or that it can be that nuance too of like, I'm just acknowledging what you're showing me. And I think that's one of the things too. Like, I was definitely raised with you give people the benefit of the doubt and give people grace. And that can be a good thing. And I think
Hmm.
that's one of the reasons why it can make life so confusing. Or it used to be confusing to me, but I've gotten better about it. There's a difference between giving someone grace because, they're a few minutes late versus giving someone grace because they're sharing like KKK posts.
Yeah.
That's like two different
There's different.
things.
Those are two totally different
Very
things.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all that fun stuff, the self-trust and stuff like that too. Of course, I was talking about, of course, big picture stuff that's happening, in the world, in our country and things like that. But even in a smaller bracket as well, listening to those instincts when you're talking to people and vetting people about, if you're who you want in your group. And then also like we were talking about before with like you have an amazing yoga studio that you go to, and they are amazing people. But vetting that, like if a person walks into a studio and the terms that the person is using, it's is very whitewashed, or they came up with this quote unquote, or in the energy work field, they came up with this quote unquote new technique, and it's like Reiki, or it's acupressure, or it's something some other culture already does, indigenous work. Like it's something that already exists, but they're putting a pretty new bow on it and they're calling it a new technique that they downloaded from whatever with it. By having a good sense of self-worth, and trusting yourself, hopefully, even if not the first visit, a couple times in, you may be like, this doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
Or with cults and stuff, like maybe after, even if it's not initially, and it's okay if a person doesn't catch the red flags initially, but that that it's okay that it's like, this is feeling less and less right. And trusting that even if initially you thought it was all good, and getting out of that.
It's like using discernment.
Yeah, and that it's okay to be wrong. Like, it's okay to acknowledge, and that's why it's like, I try not to hold on to first impressions too much with it one way or the other, because I could always be wrong. And I've noticed that for me, by acknowledging that I could always be wrong about a first impression, I'm more inclined to catch if a person was showing their best face, and then their real morals, their real ethics, their real values are starting to come to the surface that are really harmful. And so because I'm okay with being wrong, and I'm okay with being like quote unquote hoodwinked or tricked or whatever, I'm okay with that. I've noticed I'm more likely to be like, well, they got me. They
Yep.
got me for that
And you
one
and you
or two
bounce right
times.
back. Yeah, you bounce right back. You're like, "Got
Yeah.
it. Okay."
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
okay to be fooled. I think that's the thing too, is that none of us are perfect. And so it's okay if we got fooled by someone, and giving ourselves grace for that and be like, yeah, it may have taken a couple visits, or maybe someone gave someone like spent $1,000 in that cult or whatever. Okay. They figured it out after the fact. Yeah, it sucks, but like you still figured it out.
Mhm.
It's okay. Get out of it. Don't fall into that sunken cost. Like, I've already done this and I've got to prove that it's actually legit. It's okay that it's not, and it's okay to get away from it. Or it's like another thing that I've been doing too when it comes to acknowledgments is also acknowledging more so with like local politicians what they are not saying. What things are they pointing out that they have problems with, but what things are they not sharing on their official platforms? And that lets me know where they stand or what they're comfortable with. And so that helps me determine it doesn't matter what they say during voting time. I've seen how they've been discussing everything or staying silent about everything. Of course, you can apply that with people too. Like, what are they saying or what are they not saying? Because silence, we know silence is as much speaking
Yep.
as anything else.
Yep. It's
Like,
still in action.
it is still in action. It still has a voice. Anyway, so, just a very fun, lighthearted topic because, again, having that, building that sense of self, building that self worth, and then with the self trust. So, bringing that with that self trust is, you can write about it, your experiences where your self trust and your sense of self have aligned. Go through the times where they did not align and what things you did, how you grew, how you evolved, how you changed to be more congruent. And again, going through that sense of self worth for your likes, your dislikes, or even your strengths and weaknesses. I had to embrace that I'm like a marshmallow at the end of the day. I want everybody to be loved and cared for. There are some movies that I've watched where it's not every movie, but there's been a couple of movies where like the bad guy gets his comeuppance, and I'm sad. Like, I know that they had it coming, and I still feel sad for them that they're suffering.
Yeah.
So it's not every time. There are totally times where I watch a movie and I'm like, yeah. So it's not across the board, but I had to embrace that because that can be looked as a weakness of being soft and being gullible. But by acknowledging that and have compassion for that, and that I have these attributes and I'm still valuable and still deserve to be respected, it allows me to hold those parts of myself too with just as much appreciation as I do my strengths. And so I know that for me with self-trust, when it comes to meeting new people, I ask my loved ones about them. Or it's like people in positions of power. I'll look up different people's opinions about it because it's very easy for me to look at a person's potential and be like, oh, well, they have the potential to be so wonderful. It's like, yes, but what are their actions saying?
Mhm.
What are they actually doing? Because one of my favorite quotes, I think I shared it before, but from High Priest Roby, if you can acknowledge a person's potential for good, you also have to acknowledge a person's potential for bad. And so the only thing you have to actually figure out between the two is their actions, what they're actually doing. All right. Anything you'd like to add?
No, I think it was really good. Yeah, this is coming in perfect alignment for what we
Yeah.
need right now, and even with the progression of our episodes. So this is so perfect.
All right, y'all. So we'll end it with that then. Thank y'all so much for tuning in to Sacred Axis, a space for the whimsically divine.